It was a humid Friday afternoon in downtown Houston, and Elijah Knox just wanted a quiet corner to enjoy his coffee and catch up on emails. He wasn't flashy, just a clean-cut black man in his late 30s wearing a navy Henley pressed khakis and a pair of modest loafers. But in the eyes of some, that was still too much. Elijah stepped into the Atrium, a trendy co-working lounge on the first floor of a newly renovated business complex. Modern architecture. Minimalist decor. The kind of place that prided itself on being exclusive. He had a membership card and had prepaid 6 months in advance, but the moment he walked in, eyes darted toward him like he didn't belong. A white receptionist with a tight smile asked, "Can I help you?" The kind of question that doesn't really mean "Can I help you?" but "Why are you here?" Elijah responded calmly. "I'm a member. Elijah Knox." Reserved a desk by the window. She clicked her mouse a few times and narrowed her eyes. That's odd. I don't see your reservation." Elijah pulled up the confirmation email on his phone. She took a glance and gave a forced smile. "Okay. Please take a seat. Someone will be with you." He nodded and walked to the open desk. But the energy was cold. A few white patrons in suits whispered as he passed by. One man even laughed and said under his breath, "Lost, huh?" Elijah sat, opened his laptop and started typing. But it didn't take long. 20 minutes in, a tall white man in a fitted blazer walked over. His name tag read Manager, Bradley. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Elijah looked up, confused. "Is there a problem?" Bradley folded his arms. "This lounge is for members only." Elijah tilted his head. "I'm a member. I already showed my confirmation." Bradley scoffed. "Look, I don't know how you got that email, but we don't offer drop-in services anymore. The area is reserved for tenants with full suite access." Elijah calmly repeated, "I paid for access. I'm not going anywhere." Bradley leaned in. "Don't make this difficult." That's when security showed up, 2 guards, both white. They didn't ask questions. They stood behind Bradley like a wall of power. "Sir, please step outside." Elijah sighed, closed his laptop and packed his bag. He wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing him angry. But as he walked out, one of the guards said under his breath, "Should have known you didn't belong." Elijah stopped, turned slightly but said nothing. He walked out with his dignity. The moment the glass doors shut behind him, something inside him clicked. Not rage. Not sadness. Purpose. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Elijah wasn't just some average man with a laptop. He was the co-founder of Solid Core Ventures, a real estate investment firm with $200 million under management. And the Atrium building? It was already on Solid Core's acquisition radar. In fact, a final bid proposal had been sitting in Elijah's inbox for approval. But now it wasn't just business. It was personal. Elijah returned to his private office in Midtown. His assistant, Tanisha, noticed his expression and asked, "Something wrong?" He responded, "Let's move forward on the Atrium." "Are you sure? I thought you wanted to wait until Q3. Elijah turned slowly, eyes steely. "I'm sure. Get me the seller's lawyer today." Within hours the ball was rolling. Tanisha, sharp and relentless, looped in the acquisition team. Elijah signed the offer letter that night, an all-cash deal with 10% over asking to ensure it moved fast. The owner, an older man named Carl Blevins, was eager to sell. What he didn't know was that the black man his tenant just kicked out was about to become his landlord. Meanwhile, back at the Atrium, manager Bradley was gloating to staff. "You gotta keep the vibe consistent in places like this. Otherwise we attract the wrong crowd." His co-workers laughed uncomfortably. None of them challenged him. After all, he was close friends with the regional tenant representative and had bragged about keeping things clean in the building. But that smug smile? It wouldn't last long. By Monday morning the deal was official. Elijah signed the final paperwork and wire transfer. Solid Core now owned 100% of the Atrium property, including the land and leasing rights. It was time for the fun part. Elijah called a meeting with his operations team. "Effective immediately," he said, "I want a review of every commercial lease in that building. We're going to reevaluate tenant behavior, diversity compliance, and internal complaints." His chief of operations asked, "You want to evict them?" Elijah shook his head. "No, not yet. I want them to see me first." That Friday, Elijah returned to the atrium. Same hoodie, same khakis. He walked in like nothing had happened. But this time he carried something else. A leather folder with gold trim, inside the ownership documents. The same white receptionist blinked in confusion. "You again?" she said. Elijah smiled. "Yes. I believe we spoke last week." She glanced nervously toward the back office, then fumbled for her mouse. Let me get the manager." Minutes later, Bradley stormed out, eyes already rolling. "Sir, we've been through this." Elijah opened the folder slowly and placed the deed on the counter. "Actually, you work for me now." Bradley blinked. "What?" Elijah leaned forward. "This building was sold on Monday. I'm the new owner. And we need to have a conversation, in private." The entire lobby went silent. Employees froze. A few customers began recording. One gasped audibly. Bradley stumbled over his words. This must be some sort of joke." Elijah didn't blink. "The only joke is that you thought you could throw out someone like me and not face consequences." The receptionist's mouth was slightly open. One of the security guards from before walked in, saw Elijah and froze mid-step. Elijah turned to him. "I remember you. You said something as I was leaving last week, didn't you?" The guard stammered, I was just doing my job." Elijah nodded slowly. "You're right. And now I'm doing mine." He turned to Bradley. "Follow me." They walked to the private glass office in the back, the very space Bradley had once boasted about to other tenants. Inside, Elijah closed the door and let the silence sit heavy for a moment. "Here's what's going to happen," he began. "You're going to write a formal apology. To me. And to every black and brown customer you've ever made uncomfortable in this space. And then you're going to resign." Bradley's face flushed crimson. "You can't make me." Elijah leaned forward. "Check your lease terms. The owner has full discretion over on-site management. You are no longer employed here." Bradley's fists clenched. "This is reverse discrimination." Elijah stood tall and unshaken. "This is accountability." Bradley looked like he might explode. But before he could protest, Elijah handed him a manila envelope. "HR already prepared your severance package. Generous, considering what you cost this business." Bradley grabbed the envelope, trembling. "You'll regret this." Elijah opened the door and waved toward security. "Escort him out. But this time make sure he leaves with respect." Bradley was walked out of the building, on camera. Dozens of phones were up. Within an hour, the video hit social media. Black CEO kicked out of building, then returns as the owner and fires racist manager. But just as Elijah was starting to restore order, his assistant Tanisha rushed in with a worried look. "Sir, we have a problem." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Tanisha handed him her iPad. "It's Carl Blevins, the previous owner. He just went on a podcast and claimed he had no idea you were black when he accepted the offer, and that if he had known he never would have sold." Elijah's face darkened. "He said that publicly?" "Yes. And it's already being picked up by local media." Elijah stood slowly. "Then it's time we show him what happens when you say the quiet part out loud." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift black voices and expose hidden truths. The video of Elijah firing Bradley had already gone viral, spreading across TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter like wildfire. People from all walks of life, especially young black professionals, were reposting it with captions like, "This is how you handle racism, the comeback of the decade," and "Respect raised fist medium dark skin tone." But while the internet praised Elijah, a storm was brewing behind the scenes. Elijah sat silently in his Midtown office as Tanisha replayed the audio from Carl Blevins' podcast. "I've been in real estate 35 years, Carl said smugly. "I assumed the buyer was some firm out of Silicon Valley. I had no clue it was some black kid with a chip on his shoulder. Had I known, I'd have reconsidered the deal. Let's just say I don't like surprises." Tanisha paused it and looked up. "He's doubling down. No apology. No backpedal." Elijah stared at the wall, hands steepled. "Then we don't just respond. We educate." Within 24 hours, Elijah launched a new initiative called Project Reclaim, a citywide mission to highlight and invest in minority-owned real estate, retail, and co-working spaces across Houston. But this wasn't just a PR move, it was a strategic strike. Using Solidcore's vast portfolio and connections, Elijah began reaching out to other commercial landlords quietly connected to Blevins through an old boy investor network called the Guild Collective. These were men who smiled in public but laughed behind closed doors, who passed each other properties and deals under the table, never letting certain people in the room. Elijah was about to bring light to their shadows. Meanwhile, back at the atrium, changes were happening fast. Elijah hired a new manager, a black woman named Renee Hollings, with over a decade of experience in inclusive business environments. Renee wasted no time cleaning house, retraining staff, revising codes of conduct, and bringing in DEI consultants to overhaul policies. Clients started noticing. A black woman entrepreneur who had been silently ignored for months was now welcomed with respect. A Nigerian tech startup founder who had once been mistaken for a janitor was given a dedicated suite and partnership proposal. The energy shifted. And Bradley? He tried suing for wrongful termination, but his case was thrown out in under a week once the security footage and racial complaint logs were submitted. But Elijah wasn't celebrating yet. He was focused on something bigger. "Tanisha," he said one morning, "pull all property transactions Blevins has done in the last 10 years. I want to know how many times he's blocked minority bids. If he's got skeletons, I want every bone." It didn't take long. Through shell companies and off-market deals, Blevins had rejected offers from dozens of black and brown business owners, always using vague language like bad timing or not the right fit. Elijah put together a confidential report and forwarded it to his legal team, his media contacts, and a few people in City Hall. "This isn't just about me," he said. "This is systemic. And it ends now." That evening, Elijah was invited to speak on a nationally syndicated podcast about urban equity and real estate reform. He spoke with grace and clarity. "This isn't about revenge. It's about redemption. For decades, people like me have been pushed out of spaces we helped build. Laughed at, dismissed, disrespected. But no more. We're not asking to belong, we're buying the block." The clip was shared by celebrities, activists, and politicians alike. But not everyone was clapping. The next day, Elijah received an anonymous email with the subject line, "Stop digging." Inside was a blurry image of Elijah walking into his office, clearly taken from across the street. The message read, "You're making enemies you don't understand." Elijah showed it to Tanisha. "Could be a scare tactic," she said, "or a warning." He shrugged. "Doesn't matter. I'm not stopping." But as the sun set, another email came in, this one with an attachment. It was a PDF, a copy of a lawsuit filed just hours ago. Plaintiff, the Guild Collective. Allegation, tortious interference, public defamation, and disruption of business contracts. Elijah stared at the screen. "They're suing me for calling out racism." He picked up the phone to call his attorney. But just then Tanisha burst into his office pale. "Sir, there's more. It's not just them." She handed him a second file. It was a formal complaint filed to the city's development office, challenging the ownership of the atrium building. Someone was trying to reverse the sale. Elijah flipped through it. There it was. Blevins had claimed fraudulent misrepresentation, arguing Elijah misled him during the bidding process by concealing material facts about Solidcore's real identity. Elijah's jaw clenched. He's trying to undo the deal. And if he succeeds, he gets the building back. Tanisha whispered, "He's trying to erase everything." Elijah stood, breathing heavy. "Then we don't just fight back. We bury him, with facts, receipts, and truth." He picked up his phone, dialed a number, and said, "Get me every client, contractor, and vendor Blevins ever stiffed. It's time the whole city sees who he really is." But before he could end the call, his office lights flickered. Then his phone buzzed. A new email. The subject line, "You crossed the line. Your family's next." Attached? A photo of his 9-year-old niece walking home from school. Elijah froze. The line had just been crossed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The threat against his niece was the line Elijah Knox never thought they'd cross. It wasn't just business anymore, it was personal, dangerous, and dark. The photo, blurry but unmistakable, showed little Cameron, his sister's daughter, walking home from school with her backpack on, completely unaware that someone was watching. Elijah's blood turned to ice. He'd seen this kind of intimidation tactic in boardroom games, but never had it spilled into his family. Never had it gone this far. He immediately called his head of security, Darren Tate, a former military intelligence officer now running private security for Solid Core Ventures. Darren didn't waste time. I'm putting your entire family on active watch. Cameron gets escorted to and from school starting tomorrow. This doesn't get any further than us. Elijah nodded, jaw tight. We hit a nerve. That means we're close. At the same time, the legal battle was heating up. The Guild Collective's lawsuit gained traction in the media, painting Elijah as a hostile disruptor, targeting traditional business practices with malicious intent. Their language was coded but clear. In response, Elijah's legal team filed a counterclaim backed with 68 pages of discriminatory leasing practices, hidden bid rejections, and ghosted minority applications from the last decade, all under Blevins' management. Still, the court of public opinion was split. Some praised Elijah for exposing corruption. Others accused him of pulling the race card. But Elijah didn't care about noise. He cared about justice. In the meantime, Elijah and Tanisha began reaching out to former tenants and employees of Blevins properties. One by one, stories poured in. A Latina bakery owner denied a lease extension despite being the top-performing business in the complex. A Nigerian nonprofit forced to vacate over a $500 mysterious utilities error. A single black father whose gym was shut down due to renovations that never happened. Elijah compiled it all into a public dossier titled, The Hidden Cost of Prejudice. He didn't post it yet, but it was ready. One click and it would be live. Back at the atrium, the energy continued to shift. Renee Hollings, the new building manager, hosted a diversity forum with local black entrepreneurs and invited press coverage. It was the first time the atrium had ever welcomed grassroots voices into its marble-floored halls. People started calling the building the comeback corner. But while things were improving inside, the threats outside escalated. Darren's team uncovered that the threatening photo of Cameron had been sent from a burner IP address tied to a network of private contractors once used by Guild Collective for off-record background checks. These weren't just dirty businessmen. These were men used to working in the dark. Tanisha was working late one night when she found something chilling. Buried deep in archived emails from the building's former legal counsel was a clause in the original land deed, an unregistered covenant signed back in 1992. It was a racial covenant. It stated, in obscure legalese, that tenancy and ownership of the building shall reflect traditional community heritage, as aligned with the founding stakeholders' expectations. In short, a quiet, racist restriction hiding in plain sight. Though unenforceable by modern law, Blevins was planning to use it as leverage in court to argue that Elijah's purchase was invalid based on founder intent. Tanisha rushed into Elijah's office and laid the document on his desk. He stared at it for a long time, silent. Then said, "We're not just fighting a man. We're fighting a ghost." The next morning, Elijah received an invitation, hand-delivered. A private settlement breakfast requested by Carl Blevins himself. At the bottom of the note, "Come alone. Let's end this quietly." Tanisha read the note and frowned. "It's a trap." Darren agreed. Or a final threat disguised as civility. Elijah's eyes didn't leave the card. "Let him talk. I want to hear how far he's willing to go." The following day, Elijah arrived at the location, an upscale, members-only dining club called the Hawthorne Room, nestled in the top floor of an old banking building downtown. The same club that once denied his father entry in the 80s. Carl was already seated, wearing a smug grin, sipping black coffee like it was aged wine. "Mr. Knox," he said as Elijah sat, "I was wondering if you'd show up. After all, I heard you don't usually walk into buildings where you're not wanted." Elijah stayed calm. "Seems like I make a habit of buying places I've been thrown out of." Carl chuckled dryly. "You're clever. I'll give you that. But you don't understand how the world works. You're moving too fast. And men like me? We built this city. We own it. You're trying to change a system that was never made for you." Elijah leaned forward. "You're right. The system wasn't made for me. That's why I'm redesigning it." Carl leaned back, his smile fading. "There's a line you haven't crossed yet. But if you keep pushing, that little niece of yours might get hurt crossing the street. You want to keep playing hero, you better remember, heroes don't always survive." Elijah stood slowly, rage burning under his calm surface. "You're finished, Carl. You just don't know it yet." But as Elijah turned to leave, Carl added one last line. You really think this is about one building? You bought a block. I own the city council. Let's see how long you hold your title. That night, Elijah returned to his office and opened his inbox. Dozens of messages from his lawyers, city permit delays, anonymous smear articles being prepped for release. Then came the worst one. Darren rushed into his office holding a tablet. Sir, something's happened. On the screen was security footage. A brick had been thrown through the window of Elijah's sister's home. Spray painted across the driveway in red paint were the words, "We told you to stop." Elijah clenched his fists so tight his knuckles turned white. That's it, he said. We take the gloves off. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The brick through his sister's window wasn't just an act of vandalism, it was a declaration of war. And Elijah Knox had been patient long enough. He sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by his executive team. The lights in the solid core conference room cast a cold glow across the table, and every set of eyes in the room turned to him, waiting. Elijah finally spoke, his voice low and steady. They want fear. They're going to get exposure. He stood up and walked to the projector. Effective immediately, we're launching the dossier. Tanisha nodded. You want it posted now? Elijah didn't flinch. Tonight. 8 p.m. front page of our site. Pinned to our social media. And send it to every journalist, blogger, activist, and council member in this city. The team scattered into action. Within hours, The Hidden Cost of Prejudice went live, an exhaustive exposé on the Guild Collective's decades of discriminatory real estate practices, complete with anonymized testimonies, copies of rejected offers, and internal emails that Elijah's legal team had gathered legally from prior tenants and whistleblowers. The impact was immediate. Twitter exploded. Hashtags like #ExposeTheGuild, #BuyBackTheBlock, and #JusticeInBrickandMortar began trending. National outlets picked up the story. Civil rights attorneys offered to help. Activist organizations demanded investigations. And then, the city started calling. By morning, 3 city council members had publicly distanced themselves from Carl Blevins. One, a white progressive who had once quietly received donations from Guild-linked developers, even called for a citywide audit of legacy real estate covenants. It was the kind of ripple Elijah had dreamed of, only it wasn't a ripple anymore. It was a wave. Carl, on the other hand, was losing control. Leaked audio from a closed-door Guild meeting captured him angrily saying, "If these people want to start a war, then let's burn the whole block down and buy it back in pieces." The arrogance. The violence behind the smile. It was all out in the open now. But Elijah wasn't stopping there. With legal support from pro bono attorneys and financial backing from ethical investment groups, he launched the Rebuild Equity Initiative, a campaign to fund minority developers, educate first-time commercial buyers, and provide grants to small Black-owned businesses displaced by gentrification. Donations poured in. Former Blevins tenants reached out with hope in their voices. But with every step forward, the pushback sharpened. One evening, Tanisha walked into Elijah's office looking shaken. "We just got a notice from the city zoning board. Our application to renovate the atrium has been denied." Elijah raised an eyebrow. On what grounds? She hesitated. They're citing historical landmark concerns, but that makes no sense. The building isn't even on the registry. Elijah stood, walking to the window, staring out over the skyline. Carl's pulling every string he has left. Darren entered a moment later, holding a USB drive. "We found something," he said. "We traced a payment from Carl's holding company to the zoning commissioner's consulting firm. 3 days ago. Looks like hush money." Elijah's mouth tightened. "Then we go public. Again." But before they could act, the storm hit harder. That weekend, the atrium caught fire. It was the middle of the night when Renee Hollings, the new manager, got the call. Smoke billowed into the sky, and by the time firefighters arrived, half the West Wing was engulfed. Sprinklers had failed. Emergency systems offline. It wasn't an accident, every expert agreed. The security cameras had been disabled an hour before the flames started. Elijah stood in the parking lot, watching his building burn, smoke and grief mixing in his lungs. Renee approached, teary-eyed. "They want to erase it all." He shook his head. "They can burn brick, not legacy." News of the fire swept the nation. Some claimed it was an accident. Others knew better. Civil rights groups called for federal investigation. And then, from the ashes, something even more dangerous emerged. A sealed affidavit, quietly filed to the court by the Guild Collective. Its contents? A forged document alleging that Elijah Knox had misused investor funds to purchase the atrium, implying a breach of fiduciary duty and financial fraud. If proven, even falsely, it could result in not just the loss of the property but criminal charges. Tanisha read the document in silence, then whispered, "They're framing you." Elijah sat back in his chair, the weight pressing into his chest. "They're setting the stage for character assassination. They want to destroy me from the inside out." But he wasn't without allies. One of them came in the form of Ava Mercado, a former paralegal from Blevins' firm who had seen too much and kept silent for too long. She reached out anonymously and met with Tanisha in secret. "I know where the original deed files are," she said. "I know where Carl's laundering records are buried. I can help, if you promise to protect me." Tanisha brought her in the next morning. Elijah sat across from her. "Why now?" he asked. Ava replied, "Because I watched you walk in and get thrown out like trash. And then I watched you rise. You've got the power to stop this cycle, for good." Ava handed over a locked briefcase. Inside were the records, bank transfers, legal memos and property management logs that could unravel everything the Guild had built for decades. But just as Elijah was reviewing the documents, Tanisha's phone rang. It was Darren. "Sir," Darren said through the speaker, "I just intercepted a police scanner call. There's a federal warrant being executed, at your home." Elijah's eyes went wide. "What?" Darren continued, "They're raiding your house. Right now. Agents. Unmarked vehicles. They're claiming tax evasion and financial fraud." Tanisha gasped. Elijah stood, heart pounding. "They've moved to the final phase." From across the city, camera crews swarmed the quiet street where Elijah's modest home sat. His neighbors watched as black SUVs and badge-wearing agents pulled files, computers, and more. The headlines were already writing themselves: CO Elijah Knox under federal investigation. Elijah looked out the window of his office as sirens echoed in the distance. This was never just about a building. It's about silencing every one of us who dares to own what we built. And in the darkness, he whispered the words. "They've declared war. Now it's time to fight back with everything we have." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The footage of federal agents raiding Elijah Knox's home blanketed the evening news. Camera crews fixated on every box they carried out, every file, every laptop. Online, trolls cheered, bots flooded comment sections, and talking heads debated whether Elijah was just another rich man caught dirty. But those who knew the truth watched in stunned silence. Inside his Midtown office, Elijah remained calm. Furious but calm. Tanisha paced behind him. "They're trying to destroy your credibility, Elijah. This is their kill shot." Darren, his head of security, placed the briefcase Ava Mercado had delivered onto the table. "It's time. You use this. You burn the whole guild to the ground." Elijah opened the case and reviewed every file. Bank transfers showing bribes to zoning officials. Scans of fake bid rejections. Even a memo, initialed by Blevins himself, detailing how to use coded language to keep Black and Latino buyers out of prime properties. This wasn't just corruption. It was generational exclusion. And now, thanks to Ava's evidence, they had proof. Elijah didn't hesitate. He called his legal counsel, uploaded the documents to a secure cloud drive, and handed everything to investigative reporter Maya Cole at Houston Daily View. Maya, a sharp Black journalist known for exposing institutional racism, went to work. And within 36 hours, everything changed. The headline broke first. Exclusive. Documents tied the Guild Collective to decades of racial redlining, bribery, and corporate laundering. The article spread like wildfire. National media picked it up. Ava Mercado agreed to testify on the record. A city councilman resigned within 24 hours. The zoning commissioner was placed on administrative leave. Public pressure mounted. Protests erupted downtown. And by the end of the week, the same judge who approved the federal warrant against Elijah issued a cease and desist order to halt any further legal action until a full investigation of the Guild Collective was complete. Elijah was cleared within 3 days. The warrant? Fabricated evidence from a shell company linked to Carl Blevins. Federal investigators flipped the case. The FBI was now pursuing charges against Blevins and several guild executives for conspiracy, fraud, racketeering, and intimidation of a federal witness. The tables had turned. Completely. Elijah stood before a crowd on the steps of City Hall, flanked by Tanisha, Darren, Renee, Ava, and dozens of small business owners who had once been shut out of the system. This, he said into the microphone, was never just about me. It was about every time a black man walked into a room and was told he didn't belong. About every black woman denied a lease. About every kid who thought success wasn't for people who look like us. We don't need permission to succeed. We don't need their validation. We need each other. And now, we own the block. The crowd roared. Weeks later, Carl Blevins was arrested trying to flee the country. His private jet was grounded. His assets frozen. His face, the same smug man who said he'd never sell to one of them, was plastered across the news as just another corrupt power player brought down by the truth. But Elijah didn't stop there. Using settlement funds and donations from across the country, he expanded the Rebuild Equity Initiative, buying blighted properties and turning them into spaces for minority businesses, community centers, tech hubs, and affordable retail units. The atrium, once a symbol of exclusion, became the headquarters of a new movement. Months later, Elijah visited his niece Cameron's school for career day. He stood in front of her third-grade class in a simple suit, holding a photo of the burned building and a blueprint of the new atrium beside it. I was once told I didn't belong in a building, so I bought it. Then they tried to scare me out of owning it. But we rebuilt it. What do you want to build? A little boy in the front raised his hand. I want to build a space for kids like me to start businesses. Elijah smiled. Then do it. Don't wait for them to say yes. You are the yes. The camera panned out on Elijah walking through the new atrium. Sunlight pouring in, walls adorned with art from black and brown artists, halls buzzing with entrepreneurs who finally felt seen. A janitor smiled as Elijah passed. A young woman in a wheelchair gave him a thumbs up. A child peered through the glass, wide-eyed at the future that now belonged to him too. The comeback was complete. Never let others define your worth. Racism, elitism, and ignorance may slam doors in your face, but when you rise with integrity, community, and truth, you don't just open those doors, you buy the whole building. Power isn't about money. It's about using your position to uplift others. When they try to silence you, amplify justice louder. When they tell you you don't belong, remind them, you built the blueprint. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths.